Howdy! Did you stay there all week? Did you wait for us for show 2 with Randy Adamsick from the Minnesota State Film Board? Well, we actually taped the show immediately after the other one. That's why we're wearing the same clothes as last week. Now, we never found out the mystery of why I don't have a desk, but not only do I not have a desk, I don't have a sidekick. So, is this a real talk show? We don't know, but we'll find out if you stick around while we do some commercials and then we come back and Randy will be here. So, if you've waited all week, why leave now?
Because disaster strikes someone every single day, there's always going to be one more night someone needs food, shelter, and a place to rest. Please support the American Red Cross. Because without your help, one more night could be hard to come by.
Next, we have the stress test. Make sure the machine is operating. How do you feel about traffic jams? Good. Root canal. I love that sound. The IRS. Oh, dear.
Maybe he didn't understand the question.
Look in your tax instruction booklet for money-saving tips from the IRS. It's just one way we're making tax preparation a lot less taxing.
Now we're back, and you've got a long list here in front of me of movies, and you had said last week that there were 8 movies done this year, so I'm guessing the vast majority of those aren't even out yet.
Yeah, dude, so we have yeah, at least 9 that have already been completed as we're sitting here talking. The one, let's see, what will be, I guess, most immediate and I'm very excited about, it's only, our part of it is only 5 minutes of the movie. But The Good Son was one of 2 movies that was shot in the Duluth area last winter. Mm-hmm. and it was great. I mean, almost all our filming has been in the Twin Cities. And I just feel that Duluth and the North Shore is just a gold mine of film locations. I mean, you could do period films set in San Francisco and Duluth, the way it's set on the lake. Lake Superior could play an ocean, as we got it to do with the 20th Century Fox production, The Good Son, that's coming out end of September. And a very interesting story there. We had a trade show in Los Angeles that we go to every year with all the other film commissions from around the world.
Must be a lot of fighting out there, huh?
Oh, I tell you, the competition is very fierce, but it's a friendly sort. We kind of help each other too, and frankly, there's so much work that's trying to get out of Los Angeles and shoot elsewhere. This summer, for instance, most every area of the country was busy with filming. I mean, most of the major markets, and there's about 15 sort of major markets in the U.S. where there's where you have fully crewed features. We have, for instance, we're known to be 2 feature crews deep, so we can simultaneously shoot 2 films quite easily in Minnesota. So we were at this convention, and a producer from Fox came up to the booth and said, I asked him if he was shooting anything this year, and yeah, he said, yeah, I'm shooting this film called The Good Son, but there's nothing that would work for Minnesota because I need the coast of Maine. And the coast of Maine. So in our booth that year, in our display, we had a picture of Split Rock Lighthouse on the North Shore. I said, coast of Maine, here it is. I said, oh, quite interesting, quite interesting. Nothing came of it. We tried to get an appointment at Fox. Couldn't. Next trip out to Los Angeles, we tried to get an appointment. Then we heard they were shooting in Massachusetts and Maine, and that was it. It was a done deal. 1 year later, they called right in the middle of the show. The film was almost done, and said, we can't find the right cliff. The climax of the movie is Macaulay Culkin and Elijah Wood, 2 of our best-known kid actors, hanging over a cliff in a fight scene, and one of them's going to die. And they couldn't find the proper cliff. They had scouted it from Nova Scotia to Virginia, from Vancouver down to San Diego, the coast of England, coast of Wales.
They couldn't find a cliff?
Then they couldn't find the proper configuration of what they needed, and then find a park system that would cooperate with all the filming. Well, what happened was, and this was last February, in Tetagooch State Park on the North Shore, Palisade Head is the cliff, and then they also did filming at Split Rock Lighthouse. And it's 5 minutes of the movie, but it's 5 minutes of a $30 million picture. So we brought about $1 million into Minnesota on that show, and what they did was use the real Palisade Head and then constructed 3 scale models. One of them has a big crane that goes out over the water, which of course has to look like the ocean, and where the cameraman's shooting back at the cliff. Another one where the kids, Elijah Wood and Macaulay Culkin, are wrestling on another scale model, and then it has a little lip underneath it that you don't see, so when they fall off the cliff, they don't actually fall. So 200 feet into Lake Superior, hitting the rocks along the way. It was just wonderful to see how money is spent on a bigger budget production, and just how a really important scene in a movie. I'm thinking of North by Northwest on the tip of Mount Rushmore. It's just how a big scale action sequence, because we haven't had a lot of those. Most of our stories have been smaller personal stories that are just kind of everyday contemporary stories. So it's very exciting. So when you see the film The Good Son, which should be out about now, just wait for the last 5 minutes of the movie, and they shift from Maine, and you'll never know it, because the area of Maine matches perfectly what was on the North Shore. But that film, like Iron Will, which is about a period 1917 dog sled race that took place, it was a real race from Winnipeg to St. Paul. That story is told in Disney's Iron Will that was shot in the Duluth Two Harbors area. And that will be out this winter as well. So those are 2 of the most exciting. I think, along with Grumpy Old Men with Jack Lemmon, Walter Matthau, and Margaret. That's a story set in Wabasha, Minnesota, filmed mostly in the Twin Cities, filmed a lot, actually they were out at Square Lake for some of the filming near here. And it's a film about 2 old guys, Lemmon and Matthau, who they're like the Odd Couple. They go out and they go ice fishing every day. They were the Odd Couple, and it's kind of a continuation of that role, hence the title Grumpy Old Men. But they would compete in ice fishing over who would get the biggest fish, and then this redhead, Anne Margaret, moves to town, and then they have her to compete over. So
did they catch any fish when they were out?
It's the movies, so you always catch something great. You always catch a great big walleye.
Now, you've just rattled off a couple big name stars who have made a lot of movies. Yeah. What do these guys do when they're in the Twin Cities?
Yeah, it's interesting. Basically, just hang out. Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau were just a pleasure to have around, and what they really enjoyed doing was just hanging out in normal locations. And you may have read it some in the newspaper, because Matthau in particular was cited kind of all over town. He went to movies, he went to stores. Jack Lemmon had his driver take him out to the Mall of America quite often, actually, and he'd just wander around and kind of kill time and unwind a little bit from, because it's a hard show. Filming is it's a really hard job, and you're talking 12, 14 hours a day for actors who are into their 70s, and it's pretty wearing. So they needed time to relax, but boy, what a joy to have them around. It's really, and again, these pictures, we feel that we're doing a pretty good job in not just bringing pictures here, but bringing pictures that actually are saying something about what Minnesota's like. Mighty Ducks is about youth hockey. Grumpy Old Men is about ice fishing. Iron Will is about an actual dog sled race that took place in Minnesota that was one of the beginnings of what is now the St. Paul Winter Carnival. So it's telling Minnesota's story, even though, as I said in the last show, we don't get to play Minnesota all the time, but we're getting the word out, and that's the other part about it. It's money and jobs and coming in with these films, but the other part of it is getting the word out that Minnesota's not some hole-in-the-wall place.
Okay, take a short break. We'll be back. Don't go away.
Looking for this, looking for that. Don't know exactly where it's at? Come on, join the club. Home Shopping Club. No need to drive, no need to run. For name brand bargains, we're #1, so come to where the shopping's fun. Come on, join join the club. Joining is easy, fast, and free. Just call to buy the things you see that come with a money-back guarantee. So come on, join the club. Around the clock, this is your store for bargains, fun, and so much more. In just 10 days, they're at your door. So come on, join the club. Home Shopping Club.
Okay, bye-bye. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's a commonly used phrase to end a telephone conversation, as in, hasta la vista, baby. But our use of okay, bye-bye has a different meaning altogether. Now, according to Webster, okay means agreement, and the definition of buy is something underpriced, or a bargain. Therefore, okay, bye-bye means agreeable bargains, which you'll find on the Okay, Bye-Bye show only on Channel 52. And by buying here, you'll avoid that sucking sound of money being pulled into the...
For performance sailors, just sailing isn't the point. It's how well they do it. If you want to improve your sailing performance, you should read Sailing World too. Every month, Sailing World's experts show you how to sharpen your techniques. You'll learn how to maneuver small boats in tight quarters and large ones where inches count. Sailing World will keep you up to date on regional events and major regattas like the America's Cup. We'll bring you the hottest new designs, from the cutting edge of professional sailing to changes in the boat sailing out of your own harbor. But that's not all. With Sailing World, you'll catch the latest developments on the sailing scene. We'll help you be the best you can be with columns that count, like Tactics, Women in Sailing, The Need for Speed, and The Art of Crewing.
Call 800-423-3100. Steer a course for better sailing. Subscribe to Sailing World by calling 800-423-3100 today.
We're back. Talk is cheap. Randy Adamsick from the Minnesota State Film Board. Now, Randy, one of the movies that's gone to the theaters, been on cable, and now out in the video stores is Untamed Heart, one of the smaller, more personal movies you were talking about, but filled with nothing but scenes from Minnesota. I mean, you can walk almost every place they were in that movie.
Yeah, and all pretty much in northeast Minneapolis, all in that the Jim's Coffee Shop, which is of course the main part of the story. That's where Marissa Tomei and Christian Slater are both work with Rosie Perez, in fact, also all in the story work at that restaurant. And when it came down to it, that was really what brought the director Tony Bill to choose Minnesota. He looked at coffee shops, again, as we've been talking about, in all these other cities, but it was the configuration of Jim's and the fact that they were willing to cooperate that made it work. And one of the particular things, just to think about what kind of space is interesting for filming, well, in Jim's Coffee Shop, they have these archways so that you can shoot in the restaurant, see the kitchen, and then even see the back room behind that. There were kind of openings due to the archway, so it just made for a lot of interesting camera angles. The cinematographer in Untamed Heart was the guy who did the submarine film Dust Boat. And really the thinking was, if he can make interesting visuals in a submarine, and that whole movie takes place in a submarine, he can shoot in a small space like a restaurant and make it look interesting. And so, it's not the, a typical stationary camera. You see a lot of moving camera to kind of keep things interesting and to keep it in touch with what is essentially a very sweet kind of love story between Marissa Tomei and Christian Slater in Untamed Heart.
Okay, and we have a clip of that.
Yeah, let's take a look at it. Okay.
Adam, what are you doing out here? When did you get here?
10.
10? I was almost 2 hours ago. You'd rather be out here with my cat than inside with with a room full of strangers and relatives. Oh. Starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight. I wish I may have this wish I wish tonight.
That's Mars.
What?
That's Mars. We just wished our planet.
Figures.
We must be back. This movie, as I remember, had a lot of local actors in it.
It was our best example. I think there were 37 of the 42 speaking parts in the movie were local actors. A lot from the Guthrie, a lot from area theaters. But I mean, you know, again, that's what the Film Board's really about, is trying to create some opportunities for people. And in an upcoming film, we have a lot of opportunity. And Little Big League is the film that's shooting right now through October. It's Castle Rock Entertainment, which is Rob Reiner's company. His partner, Andy Scheinman, is directing for the first time. And it's a story about a 12-year-old kid who inherits the Minnesota Twins.
Now, how did they pick the Twins to be the team for this?
That's another interesting story. The story was written for the Kansas City Royals. And again, a lot of the logistics that come into play. It's getting late into the season. They know that they were going to be shooting into October. So it really means weather's going to get, especially the way the weather's been in the Midwest this summer, pretty iffy about shooting into October. I mean, we could have snow in October here. So they thought much the same about Kansas City. So their choice was really to go either south or to go to a dome stadium. And they felt the story was very Midwestern in tone. It wasn't a story that could have been about the Boston Red Sox or New York Yankees. It was really Midwest in flavor all the way, because what it's about is this kid who inherits the team. He's a little baseball genius, and it's a very baseball literate movie. I mean, you guys cover the Saints, and there must be a lot of baseball nuts around here.
That there are.
And you'll love the baseball content on this, because it's really true to the game. And the kid, Billy Haywood, in the story, really takes the Twins, who are a struggling team, and what they need is to sort of introduce some fun into the game. And that's what he tells the players: relax up there, have some fun. This is baseball, you know, just what coaches are supposed to say. Well, in the meantime, he sort of becomes a little old man, because he inherits with the team all the worries that go with it. So instead of being out, you know, at the malt shop or playing ball with his buddies, you know, he's in a cafe, you know, making up his lineup and drinking coffee, even though he's only 12 years old. And so it's kind of that juxtaposition of being an old man versus a kid, and how we need a little of both in our lives kind of all the time. It's a wonderful script, Little Big League, and a lot of opportunities for people to appear, because we need 14,000 extras in all those baseball scenes that are going to be shot at the Metrodome.
Fill up the dome with extras.
Yes, yes, so we need a lot of them. And if I could, can I give out a phone number?
Give the number.
650-0080.
Now, is that for the film?
That's to be an extra.
Oh, okay.
That's a special hotline that the film has set up for people who want to be extras in that film.
Okay.
And or they can call the Minnesota Film Board, and we'll give people the number. But we're going to need a lot of bodies to fill those stands.
14,000 is a lot.
In October, it certainly is.
Now,
and it's
what do they
be a lot
get?
Of fun.
Besides being in a movie?
You get to be in a movie.
That's it.
Some of the positions are paid. I think most of them are. It's usually 25 or 50 bucks. I mean, it's not a lot of money for a full day's work. I think what you really get is, I think being on a movie set is really an interesting thing to do for at least a day, just to see how it's done. I mean, a lot of what our work at the Film Board is about is kind of demystifying this process and make people realize this is a business. We need certain things to happen to make this business come to the state, and we need a lot of cooperation. And with extras, that really comes into play. So, you know, if you have a lot of patience, which is what it certainly takes to sit in the stands and cheer for the same scene.
Cheer on call.
14 takes of the same scene. We want you, definitely. So keep that in mind, folks.
Okay. We'll take a short break, and then we'll be back.
The only thing you stand to gain by putting off joining the YMCA is weight. On the other hand, Look at all you have to gain by joining. Call your local Y for information. The YMCA. Don't put it off.
We're back. Now, Randy, you've talked about 14,000 extras for this movie that's being done now, and looks like you have a steady array of movies coming to Minnesota, and in fact, you said we could do 2 movies deep, have crews for 2 movies. Does this mean that when Los Angeles comes here, when Disney comes out, that they're not also bringing all the lights and the film equipment and the technicians, and there's people actually living in Minnesota making a living, making movies?
Yeah, that's true. That's a pretty recent development, though, because both for actors and technical crew, traditionally it's been the case where you go work on a feature when it's in town, and then you go back to shooting commercials. It's just in the last 3 years or so we've kind of delineated, and people who do commercials tend to stick with that, and now we've had just enough feature work really to to sustain a lot of the crew members. At least we have 500 crew members in the state now with feature experience. That's a lot of people to keep at work. And some pictures do it better than others. Frankly, on Little Big League, the Minnesota hire was a little bit disappointing. On Untamed Heart that we talked about, 70% of the crew and about 90% of the acting roles were Minnesotan. So it really varies, and sometimes it has to do with just the needs of the production. Sometimes in Little Big League, a cinematographer was hired who wanted to work with his own people, which is understandable too when you're working with people 14 hours a day, oftentimes 6 days a week. So it really varies, and it's, our first job is to bring the movies here and make sure the money's spent here. Our second job after that is really to provide some jobs. So we need to work pretty hard right now too, since a lot of people aren't working. We need a couple more shows for the fall, and we're going to go out to Los Angeles and get them. And one of the interesting things, we've now enlisted the support of Governor Carlson. He's done a complete about-face on the film board from trying to cut our budget a few years ago. He's one of our biggest supporters now, and we're going to do in October what a lot of the other state film commissions do, which is to enlist their governor as a sales agent. So we're going to take Governor Carlson to Los Angeles for a day, call on 2 or 3 studios, and it's really sales calls. I mean, we could be selling aluminum siding, but it's selling Minnesota as a location, and I think the benefits of doing that are certainly clear enough at this stage of the game that we know that it's a worthwhile investment.
Now, there's obviously all kinds of needs in a movie, jobs and positions and stuff. Is Minnesota able to provide some of the equipment? I mean, is there enough business that it's actually here now?
Absolutely. We have virtually all the equipment, and most of it was here because of all the commercials that are shot here. There are a few vehicles we don't have. We don't have a catering truck. We don't have those fancy cranes, for those big, fancy moving crane shots you see oftentimes in the opening sequence of a movie where the camera's moving across a whole street or through a park. There's probably 5 or 6 vehicles we don't have. That's about it. Virtually every other service, whether it's a person needed, a trained person in a certain position, or a piece of equipment, or a facility, or services like good hotels that people can stay in for 2-3 months at a time. We really have it all here. And the word's getting out in Los Angeles. I mean, the director of production for Disney came out to speak about a month ago and said, pretty much corroborated what we've been saying, that the word is kind of out on the street that Minnesota's a hot location for filming right now, and we sure hope we can keep it that way.
Is the opportunity out there for people who maybe haven't had the schooling yet to work on films? Is there a number they can call to find out what's
Sure.
happening in town?
Yeah, I would just check in with the Minnesota Film Board. There's a lot of different ways to plug in. I mean, but if you call the film board, you know, we might tell you to take classes, you know, out here in public access, because that's really the start of things, of getting some skills. Because we're not just talking, in the general scheme of filmmaking in the state, features are only about 10% of it. There's a lot of corporate video work, there's a lot of work in broadcast and cable, there's a lot of work in shooting commercials. And those are all areas that, you know, everybody has their eyes toward features, and that's sort of the icing on the cake. But you know, there's just a lot of interesting jobs, and a lot of jobs that you need to do to sort of lead up to working on features. But there's always roles for you know, production assistants and being extras, or you know, it's just that's what's great, and that's why states invest in filming, is the money is spent so many different ways. It's not sitting in one pot, you know, out at Paisley Park Studio, for instance. They get very little, actually, of the overall money that's spent in filming here. Most of it's spread through the community, and that's why it's such a good business. It comes in here, spends the money, doesn't pollute, and goes away. And in the meantime, hires a lot of people. And what's best to see is the growth in not just the number of people working, but people are moving up in positions. They may have started as a camera assistant, now they're a camera operator. Hopefully they'll be working up to cinematographer. And that's going to be real important, because we're good at bringing work from Los Angeles here. We're also just starting to be good at generating projects that are profitable from Minnesota, and that's kind of the next step for us.
And I was going to say, what's in the future for the film board? What do they want to build on besides just more films?
Yeah, I think that's really it, of getting local production. Now, a very interesting development in that area. Pat Proft, the writer-producer of
Columbia Heights.
From Columbia Heights, exactly. Of the Naked Gun movies, wrote a number of the Police Academy shows, Hot Shots. I mean, these are major, you know, big box office movies, some of the most successful movies of the last 5 years. Pat Proft is a Minnesotan. He'd been in Los Angeles nearly 20 years. He just moved back here. And we're starting to see a little bit of that. And if he moves back here, he has a project that hopefully gets a green light from the studio. He might shoot here next summer. That's just the kind of thing we need here, especially since Prince isn't making movies these days. We need some locally based productions, and I'm very heartened. We have a market for independent films in New York. Part of the Independent Feature Project next month. There's 8 Minnesota projects out there that are either completed or partially completed. And a lot of what's heartening about that is I see the skills were developed from people who were working on these features coming from Los Angeles. So we can turn that around and have more projects based from here, because there's a lot of good scripts that I read from Minnesota, a lot of good directors that deserve a chance, and you know, we have all the other skills to back it up. So that's really all it takes, and that's our plan. That's what I'd love to see happening in the next 5 years or so.
Great. Thanks, Randy.
Thank you.
This has been Talk is Cheap, and like always, we'll be back next week.